your program success for our East affiliates. So I'm one of the few that are on the east side of the state here in Michigan. I'm super excited about this conversation, and I want to say hello and welcome to all the panelists.
Thank you, Cedric. And with that, we will turn it over to our first panelist to introduce himself, Antonio Casme.
Hi, how are you guys doing? My name is Antonio. I'm a Coahuiltecan and Boricua in my ancestry. So that's people indigenous to southern Texas and northern Mexico and the island of Puerto Rico. And yeah, I work with the National Wildlife Federation, engaging young people in getting outdoors, connecting with nature. I work a lot with environmentalists and indigenous communities throughout the Great Lakes too.
And Antonio, what's your favorite snack? That's one thing we're doing this time.
My favorite snack is fruit. I love pomegranates.
Oh, very nice. Thank you.
All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Dr. Sarah Tanis, and I'm from Kalamazoo Valley Community College. And my favorite snack is anything with peanut butter.
Nice. Thank you, Sarah. Jackson.
My name is Jackson Couch. I'm an EMT with Life EMS Ambulance based in the Kalamazoo downtown area. And my favorite snack would probably be anything like fruit snack related. Scooby-Doo ones specifically.
Thank
Sounds
you.
good.
Rachel.
Hi, I'm Rachel Hodge. I am a paramedic for Medic One Ambulance. Our main station is in Benton Harbor, Michigan. And my favorite snack, I also like fruit, specifically like blueberries, raspberries, those any type of berries really.
Katie.
Hey, good morning. I'm Katie Sperling, and I am the County Director for the Department of Health and Human Services in Aranac County and Bay County. My guilty pleasure, I think, would have to be sour cream and onion chips. Although I try to eat lots of fruit, but when it comes to chips, that's just my guilty pleasure.
Thank you. Lindsay.
And I'm Lindsay O'Neill. I'm a social worker in Kalamazoo at Integrated Services of Kalamazoo, our local community mental health organization. And my favorite snack is anything with cheese in it.
Hear you. Cedric, what about you? What's your favorite snack?
I'm gonna go with granola, but Katie, I'm a fan of chips also. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, there's the snack that I have that I don't tell people about is Doritos, nacho cheese Doritos. So that's my guilty pleasure to go with your theme, Katie. So with that, thanks again, everybody, for joining us. And I turn it over to Antonio, who will be talking to us about his field. And all the panelists will have time to go one after the other, introducing themselves and their profession and their educational background. But like I said earlier, if you have questions, please add them to the chat. Antonio.
Yes. So, as I mentioned, I run the Detroit Leadership and Environmental Education Program, and these are some of the students. The goal of the program is to develop young people into the next generation of environmental and conservation leaders. There's a photo from a protest that students were engaged in. There are a lot of barriers to entry. You know, a lot of this, we kind of believe that in order to get young people to engage in fighting to protect the environment, they need to experience it. So there are a lot of barriers to entry for Black and brown people to connect with the environment. If you look on this map on the left, it's kind of based around class and wealth income. As you can see, Detroit is a relatively impoverished city. Like those really, the red dots really outline Detroit in a lot of ways. And the map on the right is a racial segregation map. So if you look at like the parks are all located really far away from the city of Detroit, which is that red sort of area there. So these are some of the barriers to entry is like the money to engage in outdoor recreation and outdoor activities, as well as the distance and transportation issues. And we do our best to help resolve those issues so that families and students can engage in the outdoors. Our program isn't really about like scale so much as depth and quality. We're really like deeply engaging young people and thinking about Indigenous history of the land. And part of our curriculum starts there with the Indigenous history. And we look at how much colonization and land are tied together. So we talk about the loss of old growth forests, and we take young people to old growth forests. We talk about the draining of wetlands and what important roles wetlands play in cleaning water and maintaining healthy water systems. And we get out into wetlands and rivers. We also engage students in citizen science and environmental stewardship opportunities. Here they're testing the health of a stream by measuring macroinvertebrate species, stoneflies in particular, in salinity. We also work to build relationships between Indigenous and Black communities because we think like a lot of that lies at the heart of some of the things that America has done wrong and violated in a lot of ways, African people and Indigenous peoples. One of the really big projects that we're actually working on right now is called the Detroit Sugar Bush Project, which is a Black and Indigenous led maple syrup tapping operation in the city of Detroit. But we also engage students by getting them growing their own food in their own backyards and their own communities, especially during the pandemic, while all the students had to be at home the last couple of years. Yeah, and that's kind of a bit about our program. There's so much more. We take students skiing and cross-country skiing and hiking and foraging for, mushrooms. And there's a lot of outdoor cool things that we get to do with students, but all the while we're talking about the environment and history and culture and segregation and the ways in which the history of land is tied in with race and class and inequality in this country.
Thanks, Antonio. I love the picture of that little man in the front there. Can you talk to us as well about how you got to be where you are today? When you were a young person, what did you think you were going to be doing, and is what you're doing anything like what you expected?
Yeah, so I took a circuitous route to get to where I am today. If you looked up this hashtag free the water or this hashtag rise up, when I graduated from, I feel like in some ways, like I grew up in Metro Detroit, as many people do in Detroit. Like you kind of are traversing both like the urban city and like family, education, different opportunities in some of the suburban places. So I had like quite a bit of cognitive dissonance trying to understand why my community didn't have the resources that it needed to be, a healthy whole community. And I think I really wanted to understand that growing up, but I didn't have like the language. But when my parents lost their house in 2009, along with like hundreds of thousands of other Detroiters, it really drove me to study economics. This was while I was in college. This is like the short version of my personal story. And when I was in college, I came to understand the relationship the United States has to Latin America, neoliberalism, Reaganism, and it really helped me understand the ways in which the banks and financial institutions were like really responsible for what was happening during the mortgage crisis. So when I graduated in 2012, Detroit was getting placed into a very rapacious bankruptcy process that stripped away a lot of the public resources and wealth for Detroit. So I made it my mission to be an activist around those issues. So we were opposing the emergency management and bankruptcy process in Detroit in a really big way with civil disobedience and community organizing. That process happened really, really fast, and it's really, really complicated. We did a lot of popular education to educate the community about these issues. And this is like taking the sort of things we learn in college around like public education events and bringing it back to our own community. There's a bunch of college students. We're all like together working on this work, former graduates. So I kind of like rapidly transitioned from the water department, became a part of the emergency management crisis. and they began shutting off Detroit water, people's water en masse. So a lot of my work transitioned into fighting water shutoffs, and that kind of led into environmentalism. In 2016, if you look up that hashtag Free the Water, I was arrested for painting Free the Water on a water tower. I was doing a lot of graffiti and public art as a way to engage with these issues too. And when I was arrested for that, and I like was facing jail time and felonies, I just like kind of was like, okay, I'm kind of done with activism for now. And I studied agriculture for a year up at MSU in 2016. And then I left that program understanding that agriculture is more about the capital that you acquire by owning land and resources. And I kind of thought agriculture wasn't for me. So I transitioned into outdoor activities. I co-founded this group called Black to the Land. If you check out the hashtag Black, you could check us out. Black to the Land is a really cool nonprofit organization. And we do a lot of outdoor stuff. And just by doing this with a bunch of single mamas, like getting their kids outdoors and engaging in nature and camping and hiking and fishing, I got the job at the NWF. My coworker Tiffany found me on Instagram and saw my profile, and she's like, wow, this person looks amazing. We should hire him for this, job opportunity that we have. And NWF had just gotten a grant to run the DLEAP program. And it obviously wasn't like a program that was about talking about Indigenous history, but because of my own peculiar sort of interests in my own Indigenous ancestry, I really brought that strongly into it. And that's like another separate conversation about how I built a lot of relationships with Indigenous communities. But yeah, it's through recognizing inequality in my life, studying it in college, graduating it, and fighting that inequality as an activist, becoming frustrated with activism and the prospects of the left in the United States, and moving into nature and agricultural work. That's the short answer.
Antonio, that's great. We will certainly come back to you later with many more questions. And Antonio referenced Tiffany Carey, his colleague at National Wildlife Federation. She had hoped to join the panel today, but tomorrow is her birthday and she is out in Arizona with the plans of hiking the Grand Canyon. So I think we all can give her a pass that that's a very nice birthday present for herself. With that, Dr. Tanis, I turn it over to you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Dr. Sarah Tanis, and I am the Director of Horticulture and Sustainable Landscaping here at Kalamazoo Valley Community College. And I want to thank Antonio for that fabulous introduction there, because a lot of the things that we are trying to do here at Kalamazoo Valley definitely play into helping Indigenous people and people of color find parks and landscapes and have those particular green spaces developed in their communities. So a little bit about me. I have actually always, my entire life, wanted to be a plant biologist. And I was very privileged growing up. My dad was actually a plant biology professor. And so I grew up having him next to me, taking me for walks out in very rural Michigan. And so I grew up in a place where I could experience that literally every day. And so that's me age 3 on the left, and then that's me age almost 50 on the right. I went to high school up in Mason County Eastern, which is in Custer. So shout out to anybody from the northwest side of the state today. After I graduated from high school, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And so I went ahead and went to our local community college, which was the best decision I could have ever made. I did an Associates of Science there. And then after that, did a bachelor's degree at Western Michigan University here in Kalamazoo. Now, after I graduated with my bachelor's degree, I really didn't quite know what I wanted to do. And so I worked for UPS for 8 years, and I learned a lot about driving big trucks and logistics and human resources and things like that. But after a while, I decided, you know what, this corporate life, this isn't me. This isn't what I want to do. And so I gave that up, and I went back to school in the Department of Horticulture at Michigan State. And so a lot of people ask me, what the heck is horticulture, right? And the short answer to that is it's the science, the plant science of how plants grow and how to grow plants. So this is a picture of me and my coworker, Wendy. And we're working with Christmas trees out at a research station there owned by Michigan State. And so we're discovering, how do you grow Christmas trees in the best possible way? And we're also really looking at the physiology of those plants and trying to determine how they grow. And so my master's degree is in horticulture, specifically in tree physiology. After I did my master's degree, I went on and was like, you know what, if I'm going to do this, I'm really going to do it. And so I finished a doctorate, a doctor of philosophy that translates to a PhD in the Department of Forestry, also at Michigan State. And forestry is the science of creating, managing, planting, using, conserving, and repairing forests, woodlands, and all of the associated resources that come along with those sort of groups of trees. And specifically, I worked with invasive species of insects and how those insects interact with our native trees here in Michigan. We've lost tens of millions of trees to invasive species. And so I spent 4 years of my life trying to, determine how we could work with those species and help mitigate some of the issues that they cause. So this is me. We are digging up trees. This big machine you see is called a tree spade, and it actually will pick up the whole root wad of a tree. And then we teased through that to get all the soil off of them. And we actually measured how much root growth there was at the bottom of those trees. So that was a really fun project. After that, I did what's called a postdoc with the Department of Entomology, also at Michigan State. As you can see, I spent a lot of time as a Spartan, about 12 years there. And again, continue my work with invasive species. The little insect that you see roaming around there at the bottom of the screen, that's Asian longhorn beetle, which is a large invasive longhorn. We do not have it in Michigan yet, which is good. It attacks maple trees, so we hope that we never get it. But I spent 3 years surveying the entire state, UP and low P, to see if that insect was around, and I learned an awful lot about the state itself and the beautiful forest resources that we have here. So some of the roles that I've had in my particular job, I've been really lucky and privileged to have traveled the world in my particular career. I spent some time in Costa Rica doing some environmental sociology research, learning how students, how they see the environment, how that changes when they are put into a new natural space. That was a ton of fun. I've been a study abroad professor for an eco-health program in Ireland. I did some horticulture research in Italy and some forestry research in Manitoba, Canada. So that sounds very glamorous, that there are still a lot of mosquitoes and a lot of mud in many of those places. So the pictures all look very glamorous, but it's hard work, but it's a ton of fun and it's very rewarding. I'm now here at the Food Innovation Center at Kalamazoo Valley Community College. My role here is to establish a sustainable horticulture program. And what we are trying to do is establish knowledge so that new students will understand what plants to plant outdoors in spaces where they can, give humans and wildlife the most ecosystem services. And so I have spent the last almost year developing that program as an associate's degree and as a certificate so that students can learn how to, better take care of our green spaces in urban areas. So I do a lot of teaching, developing new classes. I do a lot of networking with community groups, nature centers, the city of Kalamazoo, and also this is a really big greenhouse production area, and so I work a lot with our industry partners. And when I'm not doing those things, I'm working in the greenhouse and also outside with the plants that we have here. And I chose this path, honestly, if I'm 100% honest, it's because I wanted to be outside. I did not want to work in front of a computer. I wanted to be out there. I wanted to be making a difference for the planet, and I wanted to help young people who, like me, they didn't really know what they wanted to do, but they wanted to make a difference and they wanted to be involved in nature. So really, I did it for a lot of reasons, but a lot of it was just because of a passion to, better care for the planet. Some of the challenges that we face, of course, climate change is always number one here for any natural scientist. The weather is changing, invasive species are changing, temperatures are changing. So we work with that, and we are trying to understand that on a daily basis. I'm also in a field that is very much dominated by white men. And sometimes that is a challenge as a woman. And for my colleagues who are people of color, it is a very frustrating event to be in a meeting or to be in a space where you're not always heard, right? And as Antonio mentioned, there are a lot of equity issues when it comes to the environment and ensuring that people have access to healthy green spaces, safe green spaces. And so that is a personal passion of mine to ensure that all people have access to those ecosystem services. So characteristics of people who do what I do. This is Sarah Stack. She is a young woman of Iranian heritage. And I got to know Sarah while a professor at Kalamazoo College, and she went on and did a master's degree at Purdue University in forest entomology. And she is currently an invasive species research scientist at the USDA. And so, we have similar backgrounds. We both love to be outside. We like change. In natural resources, you have to enjoy change and the way things are moving, and you have to be flexible, and you have to be able to really observe the natural environment. And what do I love about my work? The people. And I love the mission of the place that I work. We all care very deeply about each other and about the planet, and I love my students. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tanis. I appreciate a lot of your points on diversity, equity in your space. Thank you for sharing that. But I have a follow-up question. So let's say that there is a young person that just has an interest in plants, right? They don't have the language. They don't know that you can be a plant scientist. What are some of the things that they can be doing now to kind of position themselves later? And I'm thinking more in terms of Detroit, right? Where there's not a lot of access to parks or plants. What are some things that they could be doing now?
Yeah, that's a great question, Cedric. And one of the things that I always tell people is there actually are plants everywhere. And one of the things that's really important for us as humans, no matter where we are, is our ability and our desire to observe. And even if all you have is dandelions or some weeds or, a poor little plant growing somewhere, think about that plant. How did it get there? How is it growing in that crack in the sidewalk? What resources does it need? There are a lot of really amazing YouTube videos and, things available online, TED Talks, amazing TED Talks about the science and nature of plants, but also the importance of plants in cities. So there's some good resources online. There's excellent resources at the public library. And I will make sure that everybody here gets my contact information. I am always, always happy to, talk with people and show up and help people see the environment that they're in.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for that.
Thank you. And there was a comment in the chat, Sarah, that said there's a student who at Hartford who just did a presentation on the longhorn beetle. Thank you. And next we have Jackson. And I also want to let our panelists know, if you do not have a presentation, that's completely okay. It was not a requirement of the job today. So don't be stressing if you don't have a presentation. All right, Jackson.
Yeah, sorry about that. If I knew we were doing that, I would have made a good one. But anyway, my name's Jackson Couch. I work as an EMT in downtown Kalamazoo for Life EMS Ambulance. So starting off with graduating high school, I went to high school here in Kalamazoo at Lloyd Norrix, and initially I went to college at Michigan State University. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and I only really went to Michigan State because that's where all my friends were going. And unfortunately, I didn't have the foresight to understand that probably wasn't the best idea. I initially started majoring in sports communications. I had an internship set up, kind of did everything I could with the opportunities presented, and I realized I didn't really enjoy it too much, and I didn't really, the classic 4-year large college lifestyle wasn't really one that fit me. And I left Michigan State after my first semester and started at Kalamazoo Valley Community College, which like I heard before, going to community college was a great life choice, and I can definitely stand behind that, especially because for a lot of people that 4-year college degree doesn't necessarily work in their favor. And I was pretty discouraged leaving Michigan State, moving back home. Like, you know, you just got to leave and join the world, and then bam, you're right back at home with your parents, and it's kind of disheartening. And it was a lot of trial and error, and I stumbled across emergency medicine by accident. I was just taking classes just to see what I liked, and I ended up changing my major 5 times in a year span over 2 colleges until I found something that I liked. And that's just a difficult part of leaving high school that a lot of people should be aware of, that has the potential of happening. So I'm currently back at college. This is technically my senior year of college, so my 4th year. And I had Michigan State and Kalamazoo Valley for about 1.5 years, and then I got my EMT license. And then I've worked for 2 years in the field at this point, 1.5 years of that being full-time on night shift. And then I'm going back to get my paramedic, which should be wrapping up here in the end of the summer. And with that, my associate's degree and my license. I decided to kind of pursue this career after getting introduced to it, just because it's exciting and it's meaningful. I didn't think I could do desk work, paperwork, stuff like that. I think it just wouldn't fit me well. And I love the opportunity to be involved in such dynamic and serious, fast situations, and kind of getting the opportunity to really make an impact in someone's life. Even though you only spend about an hour with them, that hour could be, you know, life-changing for them. And having the capacity to handle that situation and the wherewithal to do it correctly, I think is a fantastic honor, especially if someone's in a situation where they have to call 911, that, you know, you are the one that is there to help them when it's no longer in their control. And I think that's a fantastic honor to have. So the EMS service is very dependent on where you are, specifically suburban and urban areas compared to rural areas, in the type of work that you do. So I primarily work in urban and suburban areas, and our days are about 12 hours long, and we're based within a coverage area outlined by our companies. Whereas in rural places, they usually work 24-hour shifts overnight at stations, where in the city, we post around certain landmarks or cross streets, depending on the call volume and such. And you never really know what you're gonna get. It's a 12-hour mystery box every day you clock in. And sometimes it's really serious stuff, and other times it's more, you know, public community assistance. There's really no like thing out of question for what you possibly could assist with or be involved with. I love the challenge of it, and I love the fact that I have the capacity to help people in those kinds of situations. And Rachel, also being in EMS, she has a different perspective, as we have different coverage areas and different call volumes and call types normally. So I won't go too into detail about how it all works behind the scenes, because she probably has a lot of insight on it, especially because she's 5 times more experienced than I am. And so it's good, honest work. And a lot of the challenges that come with it aren't necessarily unique to EMS, but more as a, you know, United States healthcare in general. I'm sure everybody's aware of how healthcare has struggled, especially here in the States. Specifically in our situations, being the frontline medical workers between us in the pre-hospital setting and emergency department staff, so nurses, doctors, technicians, stuff like that. And there's a lot of low staffing, as well as overwhelming amounts of patients. And the circumstances and the solutions to these things are far more complicated than I can confidently go over. So there's a lot of stress that goes on with the job. even if it's, you know, exciting, and even if you like what you're doing, it's still, you have to have good coping mechanisms and good stress management techniques. And it takes a lot of practice, but it's good once you get into it. A lot of the stuff that we end up doing is coordination with the emergency departments and physicians on scenes, as well as the fire department and police departments, as we are a facet of 911 or emergency services. And it's, you know, I wouldn't change it for the world. It's, you know, how stressful it can be, but it fits me, and I'm excited to be in it. As far as characteristics go, empathy is the biggest one you can have, especially when you constantly see people and similar complaints and things start to get normal. And so as far for me and people, especially with more experience in the emergency medical field, how some things to the average person would be significant or scary or intense, for us is like, that's just Tuesday. And so maintaining that reality of empathy and understanding is something super important to have. And good wherewithal and confidence are a huge thing, especially when you're the one directing kind of chaotic scenes, especially those in circumstances totally unfamiliar to you, and being cognizant of the fact that that's something you have to deal with.
Thank you, Jackson. Thank you for sharing. I love the fact that you mentioned that you have some coping strategies, just because it's an intense environment. And for the young people watching right now that may be considering being an EMT, I'm wondering if you can share some of that stuff just for them. If you're considering being an EMT, what are some of your coping strategies? What should you be okay with doing daily?
Specifically for me personally, I think physical fitness and just exercising is a huge thing. Physical health and mental health go hand in hand, and there's no doubt behind that. Especially in this kind of line of work where being fit is very important, especially, you know, not completely with emergency medical, but with like fire response or police response. It's important to be physically fit based on the challenges and the daily activities, a lot of lifting at work. Exercise is huge, important. Diet, sleep, I think, is the #1 thing, and that can go for anybody. No one sleeps enough, and having a consistent, healthy sleep schedule is paramount to all facets of health. And talking to people. There's no need to keep things inside, especially if you have a difficult situation, whether it's like a situation where things are so downhill by the time you get involved that everything you do is just out of desperation, or if you have a bad situation with just the facets of life that aren't too good, definitely talk about it, because you do see it quite often, and you see a realm of the world that the average human being doesn't have a light into. And so don't keep it in, and just maintain your healthy physical lifestyles. And that works really well for me. And I would encourage everybody, whether they're in this position or not, to engage in those things.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Sleep, I'm going to second that. Sleep is at the top of that list. Good sleep matters.
It's your 8 hours. Do it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Rachel, I think you're next.
Okay. Hi, my name is Rachel Hodge. I'm a paramedic for Medic One ambulance. I've been in EMS for about 10 years and a paramedic for about 8 years now. In college, I studied, I got my bachelor's in applied science with a minor in health management. Similarly to Jackson, I went to a community college, went to Lake Michigan College, and then transferred almost all of my credits to Siena Heights University and got my bachelor's there. Let's see. As far as thinking about what I wanted to be growing up, I can remember being as young as 3 and convinced I was going to be a firefighter at the age of 3. Around age 9, I started to become more interested in the ambulance and what happens when you call 911 and, ambulance just passed me, I got to go follow it. So around age 9 is when that started to pique my interest. And then I decided that I wanted to do something in the medical field. I wasn't sure what. And it wasn't until my senior year of high school, we were offered the share time program where you could were of turning on get dry quickly. I'm the type of person that wants to help people in situations.
And Rachel, you're breaking up a bit. You might want to try going off camera and see if that helps.
Sorry about that.
There you go. Now you're back. Yep, you're back.
Okay. Okay, I'm not sure what the last thing you heard was.
The last point.
So I was just saying.
3 years old. 3 years old. Last thing we heard.
Oh wow. Okay.
Okay.
I'll back up a little bit. So around 3 years old, I was convinced I wanted to be a firefighter. And then around the age of 9 is kind of when I started to get more interested in the ambulance and what happens when you call 911. And so around that age is when I decided I wanted to do something in the medical field. And it wasn't until about high school, my senior year of high school, that I was introduced to EMS. And I did the dual enrollment program in high school. And that was kind of the beginning of things for me. Aside from, getting to drive fast and turning on the lights and sirens, I've also, always had this desire in me to help people, especially when they're in very stressful situations, situations where they need it most. I've always just wanted to help. And the older I get, the more I realize it's not just a career for me. It's not just a job. I feel like it's something that God has called me to do. Some different roles that I've had over the years. I've been in FTO and preceptor for new employees and interns. And I've also helped with a few training exercises. Most recently, I got my BLS instructor license, which just allows me to teach. I can teach first aid, CPR, and AED use to the public. Jackson touched a little bit on the hours that we work. So the company that I work for, we actually do 24-hour shifts. And we rotate different stations. So some stations are busier than others, but we do 24-hour shifts. And it's similar to I guess a firehouse. If you want to picture, what a firehouse would be like. We sleep at the stations, we eat there. And yeah, a typical day for me, we'll start at 8 a.m. So for example, I'll start at 8 a.m. on Monday morning, and then I won't get off until 8 a.m. Tuesday morning. And so in the morning, we check out the truck, we make sure everything is good, we clean the station because that's our home for the next 24 hours. And from there, we just wait for a call. And sometimes the calls are really serious, sometimes they're not so serious. Sometimes we will transfer to different hospitals. We'll take patients from one hospital to another, or if the person is bedbound, then we'll take them by the stretcher to a doctor's appointment. So we don't just do emergency transport, we also do medical transports. I really love being able to help people in this profession. And I also love my coworkers. I love the people that I work with. You know, they're kind of like family to me. A lot of them watched me grow up on the job. So they, you know, that holds a special place in my heart. Yeah. And some of the challenges that we face are, and Jackson also kind of touched on this a little bit, you know, sometimes we never really know what we're walking into, and the calls can be very stressful sometimes. You know, sometimes it's chaotic. We might get called to one thing and then we walk in and it's something completely different. So that can be a challenge sometimes. And sometimes the hours, I've missed some family functions, I've missed a few holidays, you know, just because that's how the work schedule goes. And if I could list, you know, some characteristics that I think someone pursuing this career might want to possess, I'll name 3. So the first one I would say is compassion. If 911 is being used, it's because that person really needs help. They want our help. And in those moments, you know, people don't need your judgment. They need compassion. They need you to understand them. And so that's the number 1 for me. You have to be compassionate. Number 2 would be problem solving skills. We encounter a lot of situations that can be both complicated and stressful, and you've got to know how to quickly come up with creative solutions, or, you know, creative ideas as to how to help your patient, help yourself, help your partner. And then the last one I would say would be, you have to be willing to learn. You have to be willing to learn from your mistakes. You have to be willing to learn from other people, regardless of their age or status. You know, I'm a paramedic, but I can still learn things from an EMT. And then you've also got to be willing to learn and expand on things that you think you already know. So that's just a little bit about my job and occupation as a paramedic.
Thank you, Rachel. That's great. And as you were speaking, Jackson was over there nodding his head in agreement with you. And I will add that, as you can see in the chat, Jackson suggested that if anybody is interested in looking at this field, to look to see if there are dual enrollment or education for employment opportunities at your school. Mm-hmm. It's a great way. You can see both Rachel what took that path. Great way to start the process early. Thank you both. With that, Katie, let's turn it over to you.
Perfect, thank you. Just sitting back listening to Jackson and Rachel and talking about their positions, it really kind of goes parallel to the work I do. I am, as I said earlier, the director for the Department of Health and Human Services in Aranet County and Bay County. I have a bachelor's degree in social work from Saginaw Valley and a master's of arts in family life education from Spring Arbor. Similarly, I started at a community college, Mott Community College in Flint, right out of high school. College was not my thing when I first came out of high school. And so I decided to start there to see really where I was headed. I always knew in the back of my mind I wanted to be a social worker. I come from a family of nurses. My mom was a nurse, my aunt, my sister, everybody. I don't like blood. So that wasn't an option for me. So the next best thing for me, I thought, was social work. Prior to coming into social work, my field of social work, I really didn't understand or know how many opportunities there are in social work. I ended up at the Department of Health and Human Services originally. In 2002, I started my career as a Child Protective Services investigator in Genesee County. So primarily the work that I did there was in Flint, in a very urban area. And similarly to what Jackson and Rachel were talking about, that every day is different. The trauma that we see, the tragedy that I saw during my time, and the good stuff, right? There was great things too. That's why I kept doing it. But it's a very humbling position to work in. I loved my time as a CPS investigator. I went into that because I have a lot of trauma from my childhood that I experienced, and I thought, what a better way and what a better opportunity for me to work through what I've learned through my life by paying it forward and working with the families in Genesee County. So that's how I ended up in child welfare. I loved it. I loved working with families. My motto and it's still today as I've moved up, has always been, I want to leave every family better off than they were before they met me. Because I know that CPS has a terrible reputation in the community, sometimes well-deserved, sometimes just perception, but it really was and continues to be my mission to kind of change that perspective, because the work that we do is so essential, and sometimes only the negative things that we do to support families is publicized, but really there is a lot more to the work we do. But so I worked in Genesee County in pretty much every position in child welfare, foster care. I was a supervisor for several years. And then in 2017, I made the jump to a more rural county, which was a huge transition, coming from a very diverse county to and a very populated county, very busy, to a more rural county, Aranet County. I don't know if anybody knows where it is, but it's right up in this area. It has about 15,000 residents, and then Bay County has about 100,000. So it was a bit of a culture shock for me. Because I was very used to a lot of diversity in the communities I worked with. But I promoted there as a second line supervisor. And then in 2019, I promoted to the director of both counties. And I oversee not only our child welfare, but I also oversee our assistance payments, and that is related to like our cash assistance, Medicaid, food assistance, those helping professions, or helping families with those areas to fill in gaps. So today, still similarly to the philosophies, even as a director, I want to leave even my staff better off today than I did yesterday. We want to grow and be a leader that people look to make great decisions based on their opinion. And though it's been very challenging, especially through the pandemic. One of the biggest things that we struggle with at the department is burnout. And I don't know if like Jackson and Rachel, you see that. I mean, because we see so much tragedy and we do our best to have those coping mechanisms, but secondary trauma is a real thing. And without those coping mechanisms, it's really hard to maintain and sustain long-term employment in child welfare. But similarly to what Rachel and Jackson were saying, I mean, compassion, empathy, I mean, every situation is going to impact you as much as it's going to impact them. And you have to have the right intentions in these positions to be that helping person and really want to see better outcomes for our families, because not everybody has the same opportunities that we do. And I always tell my staff, and I tell myself, you know, if I had made one different choice throughout my life, I could be on the other side of things. And if CPS or foster care or somebody came to my door, I would want to be treated with dignity and respect. And that's how I lead. And that's how I worked with the families in child welfare. So I don't know if I hit all those questions, but when I get talking, I get very excited about the work I do. So
Thank you, Katie.
That's a little
Your
nutshell.
passion definitely communicates very loudly. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
And in the interest in time, I want to move over to Lindsay, last but certainly not least.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and I've enjoyed being able to hear everyone else first. So again, my name is Lindsay O'Neill. I am a master social worker. I have a master's degree in social work as well as a bachelor's degree. My bachelor's is from Western Michigan University, and my master's is through Grand Valley State University, and I'll get into why a little bit later. I grew up on the east side of the state in Troy, Michigan. I don't know that I wanted to be a social worker when I grew up because I don't know that I knew what a social worker was. There was some conversations about a youth minister at one point. And then when I started school, when I started as a freshman in college, I did the opposite of Jackson did. I went and found a school that nobody I knew went to in Bowling Green, Ohio, called Bowling Green State University, basically in the middle of a cornfield. Also don't recommend that either because out-of-state tuition is very expensive to live in Ohio. And the idea that you're going to create this new life in college is a complicated one. So I was there for a year and decided to come back to Michigan and ended up at Western Michigan University. I started in the special education department and actually saw this program called social work and attended the Social Work 101 Introduction to Social Work class taught by a man named Don Cooney. And anybody from Kalamazoo probably knows who Don Cooney is. He is one of our city commissioners and has been teaching at the School of Social Work at Western for, I think, since Western was built. But he's an incredible man, and I attended his class and I said, this is what I'm going to be. And there wasn't really a question after that. After getting my bachelor's, I worked on something called an assertive community treatment team. And that is, I was referred to that. There's an agency called Interactive Michigan in Kalamazoo that provided services to people with serious mental illness. So that means things like schizophrenia, bipolar, head traumatic brain injuries, things like that. And I was actually placed there as an internship. So for those of you that eventually do internships, take those seriously. They often lead to full-time employment. And so when I was an intern, there was a spot that became available and they asked me to come on. I did that for 6 years while I went back and got my master's from Grand Valley. The reason I chose Grand Valley, not because I like to drive an hour 3 times a week, but because they had what's called an advanced generalist program. And so that allowed me to get both the clinical and an administrative degree in one swoop. They also allowed for an advanced standing program. And so that allowed me, because I had a bachelor's in social work, to move through a little bit faster. You might find that when you move from bachelor's to master's in different types of work, that there are opportunities to accelerate your time if you did well in the program before. So always keeping that in mind as well. After I got my master's, I flipped things a little bit and joined the Peace Corps. And so I spent 2 years in Southern Africa, in Botswana, just north of South Africa, in a city called Maun, working and living in the community that I was working in, providing services to people with both physical and mental disabilities at a center in the northern part of the country. And my focus was working on HIV and AIDS education and prevention for individuals with disabilities, because there's a lot of messaging and programming, especially on the continent of Africa, for HIV prevention. Not a lot is focused on those with disabilities. So making sure we addressed, people who are vulnerable, and just how is a non-hearing person supposed to hear a radio message? So things like that. So I was there for 2 years, had an incredible experience in the desert, and came home and surprisingly came right back to Kalamazoo, even though I didn't think I was going to, and right back into the field of mental health. So I've been with Integrated Services of Kalamazoo, which used to be known as Kalamazoo Community Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. We provide mental health and substance use disorder treatment for individuals with mostly Medicaid or underinsured or non-insured. We do take some private insurance, but we have programs from everywhere from youth and families to individuals with developmental disabilities and people with serious mental illness as adults. I personally am the supervisor of a the team that we call the Corrections Recovery Unit. My team is focused on working in all aspects of the criminal justice system. So we're located in our county jail. We run our mental health recovery court, which is a diversion court for individuals with mental health diagnosis who have committed low-level felonies and misdemeanors, as well as liaison with probation and parole and our local law enforcement. We are working on a lot of projects right now and just got a grant. I write a lot of grants as well, so that Peace Corps time helped. Just got a grant from the federal government for the next 3 years to create a partnership between mental health and local law enforcement and create different response models. So obviously we've all seen lately that police aren't always the best ones to respond to situations, and oftentimes are responding to things that aren't criminal in nature, but are more crisis in nature. So we're working on creating crisis response programs and teams within specifically for our county, to provide alternatives to just sending Jackson and Rachel with a police officer. Maybe I go with Jackson to help address some of the things that are happening. So we're really working on that. I don't have a clear cut plan yet, but that's where we're going. My day, like many, like the EMS workers here, is different every day. It's crisis work, it's working with the police and working in the jail. And so you never know what that is going to be. I also really split my time between clinical work and administrative work. So while I spend a lot of times in meetings and doing planning and budgets and things like that, I also spend at least 3 days a week in our county jail or out in the community seeing people and making sure that I'm still practicing those clinical skills, because that's really important to me. I love my work because I get to work with people every day, and I never know what my day is going to look like. I also love what I'm doing right now because I feel like I get to create things for the future and create sustainable ways that we can make the change that it really is happening right now. The challenges is that I never know what any day is going to look like, but that's also what I love about it. So you have to be, and that's really the characteristics that you look at. I mean, empathy, which is different than sympathy, really trying to put yourself in that person's situation and understand where they're at is huge. Having this non-judgmental stance. I see things every day that I may have an opinion about or may affect me in certain ways, but really being able to address that within myself and not carry that over with the person I'm working with. And then also being flexible and willing to shift gears in any given time, again, in crisis work and first responder type work. What you think you're going to do that day is, laughable because it's going to get changed. So you have to be willing to do that and change those priorities very, very quickly. I think that's what I have for you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Lindsay. And I think the theme throughout all of our panelists are a real commitment to making a difference, whether that is for our environment and our world, our planet, or for people. Very clear passion that all of you have. And we are incredibly grateful that you chose to spend some of your morning with us, telling us your story and educating our youth and really helping youth to achieve a future beyond their imagination. That's why we do this, is to introduce our young people to pathways such as the ones you've taken so that they can see if it's the right fit for them. So we really appreciate all of you being here. I wish we could have done this. We could have spent 3 hours. There are so many questions I'd love to dig in further. So if you are attending today and you have young people who have questions that they did not have time to get asked, please send them to a YS team member and we will personally follow up with the panelists to get them answered. With that, I want to really thank you as panelists, Antonio, Sarah, Katie, Lindsay, Jackson, and Rachel. Thank you so very much. It's really been an honor to have you. And Cedric, great job as a co-host. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you
you.
to all the panelists. You guys have been great.